Hello, and welcome to the Fantasy Rewind podcast. I am your co-host, Dylan Stoll, and I'm joined as always by my friend, Michael Whifford.
House of Dragons, episode 2, called episode 2.
Right? Yeah, so I was just going to say, I'm like, this is House of the Dragon discussion for episode 2, titled Episode 2. Because when I watched the series, they didn't have the title up for episode 2 here. Not sure if that has changed since, but to my knowledge, it has not. So we will get into the discussion here for the breakdown of that. But before we get into that, I'm going to give you out the reminders here. If you want to get into contact with the show, you can do so at Fantasy Rewind Pod on Instagram, at Fantasy Rewind on Twitter, or fantasyrewindpod@gmail.com if you want to send us an old-fashioned email. So, if you do that, we'll send you guys stickers. Got holographic, got non-holographic. They all look amazing. So if you want a sticker, make sure you reach out. All right, Mike, jumping right in here with the content for this House of the Dragon episode 2. What were your general thoughts on the show for this episode?
It was good. I was surprised that we haven't really had, outside of episode 1 with the mom and the child dying, we really haven't had too much in terms of action. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like in Game of Thrones, I guess I'm holding it to Game of Thrones because, same universe and everything, but it felt like every episode somebody else was dying, at least that first season or, the first couple seasons, I guess. Maybe I'm just remembering it differently.
Well, I mean, did you miss the part where everyone was getting fed to the crabs?
Well, yeah, but no major
No
characters.
one major died. You're right.
And I was really expecting it to happen, in this episode. So I thought this episode was good. For different reasons. Mm-hmm. But I enjoyed it. What were your thoughts, Dylan?
So my first takeaway that I want to talk about with this is what I want to say right now is the time jump. So 6-month time jump there. I think it's important to just address that right off the bat here. I didn't mind it, actually. I thought it was a little random at first, but then once everybody started talking about it, it's been 6 months since my mother died. I think it's time my dad found a new wife. She wasn't the one saying that, but it was obviously other people were. It's like 6 months, my lord. You can take a new wife now. And so I thought the 6-month time jump was a little odd.
Yeah, well, it was definitely important for the
progressing the story
events
and everything
that happened in this story in order for us to add that 6-month time jump. I still had a few issues with some of the things they did.
Agreed.
And I think they did some of it for shock factor, like at the end of the episode, but I still didn't, I don't know, I didn't feel like it was as plausible or believable as it could have been,
Right. And so for me, I know it's like, if this was all the action we got after 6 months, like that 6-month kind of like huffing and puffing of like Daemon being angsty that he wasn't at court, we don't need to see that necessarily. So I'm cool with it on there. What has me a little bit worried about this, though, is just at this pace, how quickly we'll get to the Dance of Dragons. And if that's going to be at the end of the season we finally get there, if this is going to slow down eventually, or are we going to keep seeing this progress at a rapid pace here, where it was a 6-month time jump from episode 1 to 2, maybe it's another 6 months from 2 to 3, I have no idea how fast this is going to go, but I just kind of want them to let this series slow down and breathe a little bit, because that's where House of the Dragon, I think, so far, is thriving. In its storytelling, in its character building, in more of the, drama, slow burn side of things, as opposed to constant action like the last couple seasons of Game of Thrones.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I would disagree with you a little bit on some of the character parts, because it feels, at least for some characters, a little stagnant, like Daemon, because we don't see that much of him. Right. It's just angsty man. And now we see his wife, not wife,
yeah.
It just, I want, if we're going to do it slow, and that's fine, but we need to get some of everyone.
So, see, I felt like Daemon took a back seat in this episode, and, I mean, we're kind of jumping right in here, but that's totally fine. Daemon took a back seat in this episode, and I felt like it was really good to see like what happened after episode 1 with Rhaenyra, Princess Rhaenyra. At the end of episode 1 there, she was being hailed as, the heir to the throne, and now nothing's changed for her. And she's kind of fed up with that, because she's still pouring wine for the old men at the table, not wanting to, or not being able to share her views. And when she does share her views, she's being silenced and told go do something else. So I felt like it was good to show like her character like starting to show some discontentment with the status quo of what's been happening here. But also like the other character part I really liked is I really liked King Viserys in this episode. I felt like he had a lot of good character moments in this one. Alicent Hightower as well had some good moments, I thought. Some not so much, but mostly pretty good. The other person, though, I felt like had a lot of growth or a lot of highlighting in this episode was Corlys Velaryon and Princess Rhaenys as well, his wife.
I'd agree with all those characters you just listed. I think the only like relationship that I probably would say I didn't find so believable, maybe because there just wasn't enough time or just moments between them, I guess, would be between King Viserys and Alicent.
See, so the thing you got to remember, though, is that when Viserys' wife died in episode 1 here, that night, Otto Hightower, Hand of the King, said, hey, Alicent, go comfort the king. And she's been with him nonstop for the last 6 months. So she's been knowingly or unknowingly wooing the king to her side that entire time there. And so when Corlys Velaryon proposes his daughter's hand for marriage in this episode, which is the big plot point of this episode, with King Viserys saying, no, she's too young. She's a 12-year-old girl. I'm not gonna make her my wife, which good for Viserys, I can say. But like all that time when the king wasn't even thinking about marrying again, Alicent has been there for him. Alicent gave him the renewed dragon figurine that was broken there. Just kind of symbolizing how she's going to help heal House Targaryen, basically, with her taking the broken dragon and making it whole again. And so...
Interesting metaphor there, but yes, I'd agree with that.
So I felt like a lot of that relationship building was done behind the scenes.
That's fair. I guess, I don't know. There was just something missing for me there because, he's like, are you going to go see the king again tonight? And like all this little here and there, like whisper, it just felt like it was just kind of like friendly talks. Like I never got the vibe that he viewed her as anything more than just someone to talk to.
See, and I don't think he did. And that's the thing.
Was good, but I would have wanted something to maybe sway him just a little bit more in that direction. Like, oh, now I feel like I could marry you.
See, I feel like the king, like King Viserys, I don't feel like he ever viewed Alicent as more than just a friendly companion. However, once the topic of you need to marry again comes up, and he's being forced, or he's having this 12-year-old girl being like shoved down his throat of you need to marry her.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't want to.
Which he should have.
I don't want to marry her. Like for political reasons, he probably should have.
Well, oh no, that's exactly why. And I mean, I'm saying that I agree completely with ethical reasons not to do it, because I think the theme of this episode, like you're saying, is the big decision was the marriage,
right?
But like you said in the first episode, where he is getting injured by the Iron Throne, and he's basically just becoming weaker and weaker as a king. It just continued.
It did.
And I don't think that him making this decision like he did helps that in any way, shape, or form.
I agree with you. I feel like that he is looking at this decision on marrying Alicent not as what's best for the realm, but almost like this is kind of what I want now. Because how I feel about it is he loved his wife Emma, she died, and now he had no intention of marrying again, I feel like. And now he's being told, you need to marry again. And rather than have somebody he doesn't want being forced upon him, I feel like he's saying, Alicent, I'd like talking with you. I could see us having children together. and kind of talking himself into that as opposed to like choosing someone he likes as opposed to choosing somebody for political maneuvers, basically.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think too, like the conversation with her, and then kind of the reconnection with his daughter, probably helped that as well. Like, oh, like it's because of her that this happened, and yeah.
All right, so sticking with like some of the other things that happen in this episode, because I feel like the best way to talk about this isn't to go play by play, but kind of paint in broad strokes and kind of talk about what we want to talk about here.
So we kind of covered the whole marriage bit. Let's cover the next part, like the sort of power dynamics within the realm, and then we'll do Daemon last. How's that sound?
No, that sounds good. And I feel like a good point to talk about here is just highlighting the small council again here.
Mm-hmm.
Because we see the small council talking with King Viserys about how anybody you want to marry has to have the approval of the small council. Oh, Rhaenyra, you wanna speak your piece here? Quiet. The small council is talking. Like there's all these power dynamics at play here, and you see it in like all those meetings with Otto Hightower and the king, where Hightower just kind of dominates all the conversations he's a part of.
So what are your thoughts about Otto Hightower? Because I have a few things I think about him. He's kind of an interesting character in that I have sort of different viewpoints on him, but I'm not quite sure how other people may feel. That's why I'm asking.
What I'll say about Otto Hightower is that he is portrayed a little differently than he is in the books. In the books, he's way more like king and country above all first, and doesn't really, at least what I'm remembering, doesn't really have political ambitions. It's more of like he wants what's best for the realm here. And when you are seeing him on screen here, he reminds me way more of Littlefinger and way more of like somebody who is doing anything they can to like underhandedly stay in power and get more power. And having his daughter marry the king, prime example here. Having his daughter go and like unknowingly woo the king for 6 months before he's even ready to look for marriage. Again, sly fox move, going in after all the power without raising any red flags.
So I think it's interesting how you said how he was in the book, where it was like king and country, and then you're comparing him to Littlefinger. And I would most of this episode I was thinking that he's a wimp. He's like a wimp. He doesn't want to take action that could hurt someone else, even though it could be the correct action for the realm, really, in some ways. But at the end there, when Daemon comes up, he's like, "I'll go. You don't have to go." And I'm just like, okay. I was like, you're gonna go and die.
Right? Like, he was totally going to his death there. And but the thing you gotta think about with him, he knew that. He knew Daemon had a dragon. He knew that Daemon had his own army of gold cloaks there on Dragonmount waiting for him. But he went anyway. He went and he followed through on what he saw. We were talking about Salmon and duty. He saw as his duty going on there to take the place of the king, where the king can't be risked to like go into open conflict with his brother because of what that could mean for the realm. Where Otto Hightower, he's like, I'm cool with it. I'm probably gonna die. I'm like having that like put on my mail for the final time scene going on there, and then marches off and gets saved by Rhaenyra because Daemon was about to feed those guys to his dragon.
Yeah, he's kind of an interesting character because I feel like he is kind of going between these two areas, vying for power, but God and country. It's almost like he wants Viserys to act certain ways.
Yeah.
Is really kind of how it comes down to, like, I want you to be like me, like, be this kind of, like, political, like, it's all about alliances and, like, looks and appearances, tourneys and choosing knights that have connections to good families that don't necessarily have field combat experience. That's more important. And, Rhaenyra is just like, what are you doing, dude? You're an idiot.
Right. Yeah. She's like, wait, so you're telling me that I could choose the one guy who's actually fought people for real before or choose all these other people that have put on a parade. I'm choosing the guy that has actual experience, and not to mention, he's the only person there that has beaten Daemon in a hand-to-hand fight.
Yeah. and he's like, you don't say no to these houses. And it's just like, no, dude, your views on what's important, your priorities aren't in the right place. And I feel like he views like it's the law, so people have to follow the law. And like Daemon doesn't do that, which is why he's dangerous. And so that's why I just feel like, we're going to see things come to a head here probably in the next episode or two. Yeah. Where we're going to see the king probably, in my opinion, probably die. Or at least Otto. Somebody's going to die soon. Because we have a lot of not unaction. What's the word when we're not making any moves, doing anything really?
I don't know what you're kind of getting at, but I know what you're saying. Like, we're having a lot of like sitting on your hands, a lot of like posturing and stuff, but not a lot of combat and action yet.
Well, yeah, because like with we talked about at the beginning there, the crab eating man.
Yeah, the crab feeder.
Yeah, the crab feeder. There we go. And we get a resolution to that sort of towards the end of what I think is going to be a resolution to that.
We get a tease of a resolution.
Yeah. So I think that kind of covers like where the sort of realm is right now. We have the king and his small council kind of, like you had said, sitting on their hands, really not making any action any which way with some of these threats that are occurring, whether that's his brother or the crab feeder.
Right. And what's funny is if you look at what happened last episode, 6 months ago, he was warned about the crab feeder. 6 months ago, he was warned, don't just ignore Daemon. He's dangerous right now. And now everything is starting to boil and come into a little bit of a head here.
Yeah. It kind of seemed like he's just kind of, he's expecting things to kind of work out because he's the king.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say on my last note here is I was really impressed with Rhaenyra in this episode. Mm-hmm. I really like her a lot. Her character is awesome. She's showing like what ruling should be. She wants to make a point that women can rule too, and she wants to prove her aunt and everyone else wrong.
So her aunt is what I want to talk about right now, actually.
Oh, yeah. Go for it.
So I just wanted to bring up, we have Rhaenyra talking with her aunt, the queen that never was, Princess Rhaenys. And so you have these two women who were both in positions of power. Rhaenys in the past and Rhaenyra currently here. But it seems like one of Rhaenyra's biggest critics is her aunt. Like, is the queen that never was, who might be a little jealous about not being picked for the Queen of Westeros, and then watching her brother, who she lost out to in that, appoint his daughter and say, no, it's not okay for you to be the queen. It's okay for her, though. She can be queen, And that's why when Rhaenys was like, the men of Westeros will never let a woman sit on the Iron Throne,
they'd burn it.
They'd burn it to the ground first. And Rhaenyra is like, no, they just didn't want you. They'll be okay with me. They knelt to me. And so we're going to be seeing, though, like a lot of cool power struggles, a lot of good dynamics build up throughout the season here so far. And that relationship between Rhaenyra and Rhaenys is definitely one to watch.
I will be interested to see if that goes in any direction a little bit more, because I do see what you're saying and what she said about about her being jealous, but I also think too that she's trying to give her a dose of reality.
Right.
Like, they will kill you instead of having to bow to you. Oh no, she fell ill, Mm-hmm. Yeah. But let's get over to Daemon, because I think he did a lot of really interesting things in this episode, which are really cool. Like, he went and he stole a dragon egg for his.
So this part is the biggest difference between the book and the show so far. So in the book, Lady Misery, like I had already mentioned, that's going to be that's her title. That's how I'm kind of referring to her as here. She actually does marry Daemon. She actually does get pregnant. Whereas in the show here, Daemon steals this dragon egg to kind of like say, oh, my new wife is pregnant. I'm going to put this egg in the cradle, just like it's tradition to in our Targaryen family. And meanwhile, Lady Misery's like, you were going to marry me? And then you lied about having a child with me? I can't have kids. I made sure of that years ago. So it's like somebody who was in her profession, you know, obviously probably took precautions to make sure that unwanted pregnancy didn't happen. And then seeing that on the screen here, like I said, is a little bit different than what we get from Fire and Blood. But it also shows like where Daemon's head is at. He's kind of at that moment where he's still kind of throwing the bird up to King Viserys by taking the egg his dead son was going to have in his cradle and saying, no, that's going to be my child's dragon. And, you know, just kind of throwing everything in the face of the king, disobeying about where he's going, you know, landing on Dragonstone and staying there, making camp there, as opposed to going back to his lady wife.
He's really just trying to
begging for
see how much he can get away with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
that's kind of...
Yeah, but I also do want to point out, at the end, when Daemon was having that conversation with Corlys, who I do want to talk about a little bit as well, when he was having that conversation with Corlys Velaryon at the end of the show there, and Corlys started bad-mouthing Viserys, Daemon was like, hey, watch your mouth. That's my brother. Only I'm allowed to pick on him. So I thought that part still showed that Daemon, despite everything, is still very loyal to his own family at the end of the day.
Yeah, he's just kind of... Yeah, he's an interesting character for those reasons, because it seems like he's like doing everything to show like, hey, I'm going to be king, but at the same time, he's not quite to that point yet, you know?
No, I mean, he was ready to slaughter Otto Hightower, but then when it came time for him to destroy and murder Princess Rhaenyra, he wouldn't do it. He's like, no, I can't do this. Here, take the stupid egg, and throws it to her and storms off, walking away.
Yeah. Very interesting character. But I do like that conversation at the end between Corlys and himself, because I feel like Corlys is planting the seeds to eventually get, you know, even though maybe Daemon doesn't want to rip things from Viserys, like he just wants to show him like what's what. By going down this path and starting to take care of some of the, you know, realm's problems, better than the king can,
like fighting the
he's going to
himself.
start. Yes, he's going to start gaining support of the people and some of the other lords and stuff. And so that's going to cause a lot more tension, and it'll be interesting to see what happens after this, because I feel like you're going to have Corlys trying to sort of maybe move Daemon in certain directions, and you're going to have Otto trying to move Viserys in certain directions. So.
The difference, though, is that I don't feel like, no matter how politically savvy Corlys Velaryon tries to be, I feel like he's not going to be able to guide Daemon in the same way that Otto Hightower can guide Viserys. But
completely agree.
What I will say is that you are seeing the shifting allegiances of, you know, House Velaryon, Corlys Velaryon, and Princess Rhaenys shifting a little bit away from the king, being more outsiders now that they've been spurned by the king and the crown and everything. And it's just another, you know, it's another prick where Rhaenys was denied the crown. Prick. Now they're being denied their marriage to the king, even though their daughter had the best, like, claim to be the king's new consort. Prick. You know, how much more are they going to take before they full-on publicly join Daemon, as opposed to supporting him from the shadows?
Some interesting thoughts there with that. I thought it was interesting, too, when he was talking about House Velaryon being older than House Targaryen even. And I thought that was pretty neat. Mm-hmm. It does show, like, he's worked his entire life to get to where he is and to become so powerful, and yet he's still denied the ultimate goal, even though he's had to work 10 times harder than all these other lords and whatnot. And I think it has to really hurt Corlys, or at least, you know, get under his skin when he walks into that small council meeting. Is like, hey, like, there's this huge problem, and they're just like, oh, we'll deal with that later, or I've sent an envoy, and he's just like, the heck? my entire empire, everything I've worked for is built off of the things that are being destroyed right now, and you guys don't care.
Yeah.
We'll pay you some money for that. Like, no, that doesn't equate to what I'm actually losing here.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Corlys said it best. He's like, the only difference between House Valyrian and House Targaryen is that while House Valyrian were the ship lords, House Targaryen were the dragon lords. And the dragons, again, that's how it's called, House of the Dragon. They are so important to the reign of the Targaryens. They're so important to the stranglehold that the Targaryens have, not only over Westeros, but over the rest of the world as well, like over in Essos, in the free cities of Braavos, where all this is happening, with the crab feeder and everything. They've never challenged Westeros before. They've always been open trading with Westeros because of their fear of the dragons. They don't want these dragons to come over there and take them out. They don't care about these ships. Corlys Velaryon, like he said, had built his house up, or helped build his house up from nothing, basically, from these scraps here. And all of that means nothing when you compare it to the living weapon of the dragon and what that means in terms of power in this world that we're seeing right now.
One last little note on the dragons is, I think it's really neat. Again, we get more lore. Like, you have these dragon keepers who keep these eggs, and like, this is still a thing right now, whereas during Game of Thrones time, nope.
Right, and they're all speaking Old Valyrian as well, so like they all speak a different language than the rest of the Westerosi and everything, and so that is really cool to see. And like, something happens later on that makes sure that these dragon keepers, don't make it to modern Game of Thrones time. But and you're begging for action here. Let me just tell you, like, once the dance starts, we're gonna be seeing some bloodshed.
So is the dance like a battle, or is it like a war kind of thing?
I guess we'll find out. I mean, I know, but
oh my gosh.
No, it is.
That's fair.
It's a metaphor.
I do the same thing to you during singing.
Dance is a metaphor. I'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But yeah, it's going to be fun to see once that actually begins, and definitely looking forward to it. So all in all, I felt like this episode, while it was still good, while I still enjoyed it, it didn't quite hit as high as episode 1 for me. I felt like it was still good and still keeping me interested, obviously, but I am starting to like have a little like wonderings about a couple things regarding the pacing and everything, like I had mentioned. And we know from the little trailer at the end of the first episode that we're going to see an age up happen eventually as well. And so I'm just going to be I'm a little hesitant around that, just because of what that means as far as pacing and everything. I really don't want them to get to the end of season 1 having completed a bunch of stuff already. And like, I want this show to have room to grow, room to breathe. And for that to happen, I feel like they need to not be so rushed.
Now, the Dance of Dragons, though, is it this big, long event?
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
It's not a singular
event.
They
are going to try to push this over multiple seasons, then?
That would be my bet. I would imagine that... How I would imagine this happening is that the end of season 1 would kind of launch the dance. And then you'd see the Dance of Dragons take place over seasons 2 and 3. Is how I would kind of hope they would do it. But
interesting.
We'll see.
These are hour-long episodes.
Yeah.
I guess, like, I don't see this event possibly being as long as, like, Game of Thrones.
It definitely cannot be. Like, should not be 9 seasons, 8 seasons long.
Well, no. Like, even close to that, though. Because I feel it's just one book, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a single book, but it's also hundreds of years of history of House Targaryen.
Okay. So that makes sense. So they could really, sort of, not fluff it, out, but they could definitely take some time and go deeper into some things than probably the book does.
For sure. I mean, like I said, there are major plot points that I know they will not get to this season, and I don't know, again, like if they'll kind of shift it, because what happens during this the House of the Dragon storyline, basically, that we're in right now, this Dance of Dragons, it will eventually lead into the Dunk and Egg storyline. And so I'm not sure if that will be the same show, or if they will shift over to a new show and call it something different at that point in time. If they'll even make it that far, who knows? But I would really hope that we don't get into the Dance of Dragons mid-season 1. I would really hope we at least kind of get close to it by the end of the season and maybe end the season with the opening steps of the dance.
Cool. I think yeah. I don't know. I'm here for the ride, though.
All right, but I think that's all we got for you guys as far as House of the Dragon Season 1, Episode 2. No working title yet at this time here. What were your thoughts as far as Episode 2 here compared to Episode 1, comparing it to Game of Thrones, and just standing on its own merit? Did you like it? Did you not like it so much? Let us know. All right, but with all that said, this is Two Nerds signing off. See ya.
Bye.